Welcome to the next installment of Python Basics. In this one, we're going to be looking again at variables, but this time introducing the idea of inputs. So some key knowledge for the input commands. First of all, an input command will ask for a single value. So it's a way of interacting with the user to ask them for a value, such as their name, their age, what number they're guessing, whatever that happens to be. It will always return a string. So that means it's going to be returning text. And most importantly of all, you must ensure that you always assign it to a variable. Otherwise, whatever inputs the user has given will be lost. So without assigning it to a variable, without storing it, we won't be able to use it later in our program. And if you remember, the point of a variable is that we can store a single value and use it later in the program. So if I want to ask the user a question and then I want to take their answer and use it for some other purpose, for example displaying it on the screen or doing a calculation on it or whatever it happens to be, it must go into a variable. A keyword focus as well. Assignment, when we use that word, what we really mean is placing a value into a variable or storing a value into a variable. The data type string is always used to represent text, letters. And a data type is the type of data, the type of value being stored within a variable, be it string, a number, text, dates, anything along those lines. In the last video, we already seen the command print, which allows to display information on the screen. So I run this command, it will display the text hi. Now we can think of print as output because it's giving information out of the program. If we want to interact with the user, we'll want to use a command called input, which is the opposite of output. So we're getting information into it. So because we are running on the command line, we are running in a text-based environment, the input will take the form of some text entered by the user. The command we will use is called input. Inside the quotation marks, we'll put a question, a prompt. So maybe enter your name. So we can ask for someone's name. If I run this code, you can see a prompt pops up. I can enter a name. And there we've got a name being printed out. However, maybe I want to print out something like hello Bob or hello someone's name. So like before, I can use print. I can put the text hello, and then I'm going to say hello to whatever is inside a variable. Now, unfortunately, because I didn't put the input into a variable, I don't have a variable to use. So if I put the variable Bob, for example, and run it, you can see I get the error Bob is not defined. If I go print hello followed by name, I will get the exact same error. Oops. When I run that, you can see I get the exact same error. So to correct this error, when we use input, we must always assign it to a variable. So we'll have something along the lines of this. The variable name that I've chosen should be descriptive of what I'm trying to achieve. So I'm getting someone's name in, which is why I've called the variable name. So I can say hello, comma, name. Now I can enter a name, Bob, and you see that works. I can run this again and maybe enter another name, Sue. You can see it says hello Sue. So that variable name can have any name that I can think of when I run the program. A common mistake people will make is they will, when they're writing this code, let's say I asked you to enter code to ask for someone's hobby, for example. You might think, well, my hobby's football, so I'm going to write this. Football equals input football, then print I like football. I've seen this error many times. That will work, but not the way you intended. So It says football, so I type in football again. Oh, it says I like football, so it must work. But it's obviously not correct. The correct way of writing that will be to have a much more generic variable name, hobby. Because you might like football, but someone else might like reading, or someone else might like eating or cooking, or whatever it happens to be. So it should be a generic one. The question should be, what is your favourite hobby? And then we can go print you like, followed by the variable name. So notice I'm using the generic variable name rather than a specific example. So running that code, I can type in football, and you can see you like football. I can run it again. It says, what is your favourite hobby? This time I might do cooking, and it says you like cooking. One of the most common mistakes I see as a teacher, certainly of very young and very beginner programmers, is when they use inputs, rather than asking a question, a generic question that can be answered by anybody, they'll put their own answer. So if I ask someone to write code, ask for someone's favourite food, they will type in their answer, input pizza, and put that into a variable sometimes. It might seem a really obvious thing, however, you'd be surprised how many students actually make that error. Okay, so it's really important that when you use the input commands, you have a generic variable name, you have a clear question, a clear prompt for the user to fill out, and then you can use that variable later on in your program. So we've already looked at the command input. So when I use an input command, I need a variable, which should be a generic explanation. So I'm going to ask for someone to enter the hobby. I'll then use the input command, and I'll put a prompt in, enter a hobby. And then I can do something with the variable. I can maybe say your hobby is, hobby. So when I run that program, it'll ask me to enter a hobby. I can enter whatever I want to, maybe cooking, and then it'll say your hobby is cooking. Now I can do the same with numbers. So let's say I want to add two numbers in. I want the two numbers that I'm going to add together to be entered by the user. So I'm going to have num1 equals input, enter a number, and then I'm going to do the same for number 2, input, enter a number, and then I'm going to print those two numbers added together. When I run this code, it's going to ask me for the first number. I type in 5, I enter the second number, I enter 2, and it gives me the answer of 52. And obviously 5 plus 2 is not 52, so what's gone wrong? Well, if you recall, input always returns a string or text. So as far as Python's concerned, these are both just text. If I run the program again, and instead of entering a number, I'm just going to enter the letters A followed by B, you can see it's put the two letters together, A and B. If I run it again and type in number 1 and number 1, again it's put the two numbers together rather than add them up. It's got a posh name, it's called string concatenation. However, we don't want it to join those two together, we want it to actually treat it as a number and add them up. In computer science and maths, we call a whole number an integer. And in Python, there is a command called int. And what int does is it will turn the data type of whatever's inside it, in its brackets, into a number, into an integer. So I'm going to do the same for this one. So what's going to happen is, like in maths, it always does whatever inside the brackets first. So it's going to ask the user to enter a number, and that's going to come back as a string. Then it's going to take that string, using the int command, and turn it into a number, or cast it into a number. So num1 is now going to be a number. The same thing will happen for num2. So if I run this code one last time, I type in the 5 again and the 2 again, you can see I get the answer of 7. So in order to use input to enter in numbers instead of text, I must use this int command. I can write it in another way. So I'm just going to take this code again and paste it down here. But this time, I'm going to take out the int command and I'm going to write it like this. I'm going to go int num1, int num2. So again, it's going to take whatever's inside this bracket, turn it into a number first. So if I run that code, oops, I made a mistake somewhere. I've got the bracket. So I'll enter the number 5 and 2 again, and you can see it gives me the answer of 7. There's one final way I can do this code. So instead of doing it like that, I could go num1 equals int num1, num2 equals int num2, and then I can get rid of the int here. And again, if I run it, I can type in the 5 and the 2 again. Maybe let's do 4 just to change things up a little bit. And there you get the right answer. So to turn the input, whatever the user's entering, into a number, I've got 3 ways I can do it. I can write it all as one line. I can do the casting or the changing of the text to a number in the print itself, or I can do it and assign it to a variable and then just use it as normal. All 3 ways are valid, and it's completely up to you which way you use. Now it's your turn to do a bit of coding. Type the code on the screen into Python and run it. Add a 4th variable which will ask the user to enter their favourite music artist. Then print out the information in the same way you have done for the other 3 variables. Now notice on the right hand side I've got an example output of the program where I've entered some information. Notice that on the 4th line here it's asking for the favourite bands, and the user can enter a value, and then it's displaying it right at the end in that format. So that is your task. Here is a challenge task for you. Enter this code into Python and you should get an error. The error says type error, can't multiply sequence of non-int of type str. Str is short for string. Multiply sequence, what it means is can't multiply the value. Non-int means it's not an integer. So why is this code causing an error? What is wrong with this code and how could it be fixed? Think back to what has been discussed in this PowerPoint already, specifically thinking about data types.